Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Finland once again, and that of course means that we're going to take a look at yet another Riku beer. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Riku Sanaksanaho, my Finnish beer mule living in Oulu in the northwest of Finland, and it's thanks to him that you guys have been able to enjoy a steady stream of Finnish reviews here on Rampant Lion Reviews over the last few months. Now, Riku's an awesome guy, very knowledgeable about his beer. He's picked me up some really great stuff, and I've been very impressed with the standard of Finnish craft beer incidentally, so if you get the chance to try some, I highly recommend that you do. Unfortunately, Finnish beer doesn't make its way outside of Finland all that often, bar for a few breweries, Salama and Coolhead notably. But yeah, you will get some really good beers there. They are a little bit more expensive, of course, just because of how expensive Finland is as a country, but if you get the chance to try some of the beers, you will certainly not be disappointed. But Riku seems to have his own beer mule network operating within Finland. He's got friends all over the place that send stuff up to him. He gathers it up, puts it in a box for me, and sends it over to me here in Sweden, which is great. So a big thank you to Riku once again for making this review and all the other Finnish ones possible, and I sincerely hope that you guys have been enjoying this little Finnish mini-series that we've been doing over the last little while. Now unfortunately this will be the last Finnish review for a little while. I've got quite a few things to take care of over the next few months, so I'm not sure when I'm next going to be able to take any beer boxes in. So yeah, we will get back to reviewing some Finnish beers probably at some point next year, but for the moment this will be the last Finnish one for a little while. But we do have a beer that I think that will be very fitting and very nice to sign off from this mini-series from. So for this review, we are going to go to a brewery that I've never tried anything from before. This is a beer style that I very much enjoy, but I'm very biased in that, of course, and you'll see why in a minute. But it is one of the few examples of this style that is brewed in Finland as well, actually. So this should hopefully be another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to Kemiönisaari, which is in the southwest of Finland, to the south of Turku, an island, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Kimito Brewing. So this particular beer is the Wee Heavy. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is a Scotch ale, and it's also smoke whiskey barrel aged. So yeah, I think this one should make for a very interesting review. Now I have to say, I'm quite curious about this one, because this is one of the few examples of Scotch ales that you'll find brewed over in Finland. But when it comes to the barrel aging side of things, I do wonder if it's going to be a Finnish whiskey barrel. It didn't say on the website, or whether they'll be using something like a Scotch Islay whiskey barrel for this actually. So yeah, we've had quite a few Scotch whiskey barrel aged imperial stouts and things like this from other breweries over the course of this little Finnish mini-series that we've done. So I'm really curious to see what a smoked whiskey barrel aged Scotch ale is going to be like. So yeah, the Finnish breweries really shine when it comes to the big malty beasts, of course. I've been really impressed with the imperial stouts and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, I think this is a really nice beer to kind of sign off from the Finnish mini-series with. But like I say, we will return to reviewing some Finnish beers at some point, probably next year. But let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. The Wee Heavy, 8.5% ABV, smoked whiskey barrel aged from Kimito Brewing in Kemiönisaari in the southwest of Finland. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Kimito Brewing. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Finnish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's been added to quite regularly over the last little while. But as I say, this will be the last edition for a little bit as well, but definitely more to come in the future. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Kimito Brewing then, and I do apologise in advance for any bad Finnish pronunciations. So, Kimito Brewing was founded back in 2016 by Jonas Salberg and his wife Stina. So, the brewery can be found in the town of Kemiö on Kemiönisaari, which is Kimito Island, and this is Stina's hometown, while Jonas is actually from Dragsfjord, which is located nearby, but also on the island. So Jonas and Stina had been living in the Helsinki Espoo area for a number of years, but they decided that they wanted to move closer to home after they had children. So Kemiönisaari actually was formed by 3 different municipalities. This is Kemiö, Dragsfjord and also Västernfjord as well. And Kimito is the Swedish name for Kemiö, which is where the brewery takes its name, of course. But yeah, this region of Finland, the kind of west coast if you like, this is where you'll find a lot of Swedish speakers actually. There's a lot of Swedish speakers in that region. You get the Swedish-speaking Finns, I guess you could say. I think that's what we call them. You've also got the Åland Islands as well, which belong to Finland. They're a sort of autonomous region, and I believe there pretty much everyone speaks Swedish as their first language and then Finnish as a second language. So yeah, if I go to Finland, I can use Swedish a little bit apparently, which is good because Finnish is very, very hard to learn. But anyway, Jonas has worked for all of his life in the alcohol business, first as a bartender and then in importing, so he was very familiar with the laws about getting beers into alcohol, but he decided that he wanted to start his own business after he got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS. But he said that after he was diagnosed with this, he stopped being afraid of doing things and just decided that he was going to do whatever he wanted, and producing some sort of alcohol was what he wanted to do. So initially he wanted to do winemaking, but this is very, very difficult in Finland, so he started brewing his own beers. But Jonas is the CEO of the company and the sort of creative brewer. He's the one that kind of makes up all the recipes and things like that. And Stina says that she is the cleaning lady, but also a brewer as well. But Jonas, of course, was familiar with the brewing process, but he'd never produced any beer when he and Stina founded the brewery, and he actually bought the old equipment, which was a 500 litre brew kit from Pienpanimo-olut, who I have reviewed on the channel before incidentally, and they were kind enough to help him get his brewery up and running and show him how to operate the equipment and things like that when they got started. But over the last few years they've continued to grow their sales and things like this, expanded the fermentation capacity a little bit, but in 2020 they produced around 50,000 litres, and this is quite a common kind of mark if you like. As I've explained in the other Finnish reviews, there seems to be like tax bans in Finland where the breweries will get to this point, then they won't produce anymore until they can invest in the equipment and things like that. So it doesn't make sort of economic and tax sense for them to do that. But as of August 2021, when we're filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 135 different kinds of beer, and there's lots of different styles in there. But of course the Scotch ale was the one that caught my eye when we were looking at different breweries and things like this. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Kimito Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that is it for your history section of this video. So I think it's about time that we get on and have a look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, it's quite straightforward actually. You can see it's got a nice kind of cross there. This cross, incidentally, is the Kimito Brewing symbol. I'm not sure what the cross is meant to symbolise right enough, but you can see there's a nice picture of old... I don't know exactly what it is they're doing in the picture, I have to say. It looks like an old, maybe factory of some description, but these guys are all in uniform, so maybe like it's army soldiers or something like that. But yeah, the artwork on this one is pretty nice. But there you can see plain sort of metal bottle cap on this one, 330 millilitres, of course, and yeah, it just looks very, very nice actually. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what we paid for this beer, but I'd guess that it would be somewhere in the region of like 6 or 7 euros. Yeah, Riku did give me a price list, but I've long lost the link for that, I have to say. But yeah, the Finnish beers, like I said to you, are a little bit expensive. Finland is the most expensive country that uses the euro, of course, but it's a Nordic country, very developed, high wages, all this kind of thing, so you will pay a little bit more to enjoy these Finnish beers, but I think it's worth it. I have been impressed with the quality of beer that we've had out of Finland. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the taste, and I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. An 8.5% Finnish Scotch ale. I think that should be good. Finnish brewed Scotch ale, I guess we should say, and also aged in some kind of smoked whiskey barrel. Yeah, this looks very nice. So, I'll tell you a little bit about the Scotch ales as well in this before we actually taste the beer. Just a little bit of sediment left on the bottle, the bottom of the bottle there. But yeah, let's look at this. So yes, before the head on this one disappears, you can see that it's poured with about a half to 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, kind of fawn coloured head. Quite a big bubbled head actually. I think that's going to fade away quite soon though, just to be a sort of thinner foamy layer. But there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. And then, you know, it looks pretty much as you would kind of expect from a Scotch ale, to be honest with you. I think this one is very much the right colour and things like that. So if we shine the light through this, this one is a very dark sort of rosewoody, dark chestnutty kind of colour. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of the colour, usually the EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do and any adjuncts that you put in the beer will of course affect the colour of it, but usually you only have to care about those 2 variables when it comes to sour beers normally, although in fairness, when it comes to a Scotch ale and the more brown sugary orientated beers like old ales and barley wines and things like this, those can theoretically play a role. It's only really imperial stouts that you won't notice these things doing too much in terms of colour. Lagers and IPAs, of course, it would play a role, but you know, it's not often that you put adjuncts in these particular beers. As I say, mainly sour beers. But yeah, in terms of the colour that we would expect from this style, this one is pretty much bang on the money. A lovely dark kind of rosewoody, chestnutty kind of colour. But yeah, one thing we have to say about the style of beer, because there's not too much more to say about the appearance. When it comes to the wee heavies, now wee heavy, as far as I'm aware, is a term that was applied to this beer style when the Americans got a hold of it. In Scotland, you would always refer to these beers as shillings, and shilling refers to the old pre-decimalisation version of the pound sterling, and it was to do with the tax that was on the beers. So you had the 30 shilling, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and 90 shilling, and as you went up the scale, there was more malt in the beer, thus you had more alcohol, and thus you had to pay a higher tax on it. What the Americans would refer to as a Scotch ale or wee heavy these days is equivalent to like an 80 or a 90 shilling, although in fairness you do also get the 160 shilling. Probably the most prominent example of that would be the Tracker House 160 shilling, and that is quite similar to what you would get from an American Scotch ale these days, or a wee heavy as the Americans are calling it. So yeah, that gives you a brief idea of what the beers are all about. So the main difference for me between the Scottish Scotch ales and the American ones, the Scottish ones tend to be a little bit more kind of grainy, if you like. The bread is a little bit kind of grainier, the brown sugars are a little bit more kind of caramelised and things and not quite as sweet, and the fruits are maybe a little touch more kind of cakey, if that makes sense, whereas the American ones, the brown sugars are a bit brighter, the fruits are a little bit more kind of brighter as well, if that makes sense. It's more a kind of bright oily character you'll get from the American style ones. But yeah, in Scotland, probably the best kind of American style craft brewed Scotch ale would be the Old Parochial from Tempest Brewery. And the kind of most classic one, I guess you could say, would be the 160 shilling from Tracker House Brewery. That's probably the best kind of traditional one, if you like. And of course, one of the classic craft beers in Scotland would be the Old Jock from Broughton Brewery, and that's a kind of middle strength one. That would be about the equivalent of, say, you know, a 60 shilling, something like that. So those are 3 Scotch ales I would recommend you check out if you're interested in Scottish craft beer. But for me, I'm quite curious to see what this one is going to be like, and that's what I'll be comparing it to in this review, of course. But yeah, that is your kind of brief history of what Scotch ales or wee heavies are all about, if you like. But let's look at the aroma of this beer before we get stuck into it and see how we go. Yeah, this, I'm going to say straight away, this is Scotch whisky barrel aged. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Straight away you can smell that. And I'm going to, it's either going to be Skye or Islay whiskey that's in that. I want to say Skye because the peat is a little bit lighter. I wouldn't be surprised if it's, you know, Lafroig or Talisker barrels that's been used for this. Although, as I say, there's quite a few Islay whiskies that will give you similar things. But the smoke that you get from one of the Skye whiskies tends to be a little bit lighter and brighter, and that's what I'm getting out of this one. Whereas the Islay ones tend to be just a little bit stronger. So I'm tempted to say that it's a Skye whiskey barrel that has been used in this. But as I say, I'm might not be 100% right, but you smell the Scotch whisky barrel aging right away in this. And as I've mentioned in other reviews, with Scotch whisky barrel aging, you have to be very careful with this because the aromas that you can get out of this can be very, very powerful, in fact. So yeah, the aroma of this beer, I'm going to say though straight away, is absolutely lovely. So yeah, but remember, I'm very biased. But yeah, this I think is going to be very nice. So the backbone of this beer, straight away you can smell that oaky character to it. And it's quite a dry, oaky, woody note that you get out of this one. So I very much like how that goes together. There's a nice sort of grainy, dry, oaky backbone to this. On top of that, of course, you're getting the nice kind of peaty, smoky elements in there. And I really like how all of that is going together. So yeah, nice kind of big peaty note to this one. As I've said to you, compared to the German Rauch malts, which are quite meaty, Scottish peated malt tends to be more, sort of grassy and earthy, if you like, and you can smell that straight away with this one. So the backbone of this beer is definitely, smooth, kind of dry, oaky notes in there. You do get one or two little hints of vanilla out of it, in fairness, which is, it's kind of interesting. So it's got a little bit of that going on, but as I say, you can smell the sort of peaty, grassy element out of this one. So I really like how all of that goes together. The big aromas that you get out of this beer are very, very nice, in fact. So the woody backbone to this one is very, very nice, and that sort of forms the baseline of the beer. Everything else kind of sits on top of that. So on top of the woody layer, you definitely get some big brown bready notes out of the beer. There's a kind of toasty, bread crusty element to it, which I really like. So yeah, lovely big kind of toasty, bread crusty element in there. There's a nice sort of wholemeally, brown bready sort of thing too. So the brown bread has a little bit of that kind of toasty, crusty element to it, as I say, as well. You've got a nice kind of big, you've got a nice kind of wholemeally brown bread character sitting on top of it as well. And then within that, you've got a big, you've got all the brown sugars kind of sitting on top of that bready note in there. You also do get a little touch of leatheriness out of this beer as well, and those are kind of some subtleties that you can often pick up in these kind of Scotch ale type beers. But yeah, when it comes to the brown sugars, I would say there's a nice big oily treacle molasses sort of thing in this one, kind of highly caramelised. You do get a bit of a toastier brown sugar beyond that, and then you get one or two little biscuity notes for me. But I would say the brown sugary notes that you get out of this beer are quite in keeping with what you would expect from a Scottish brewed Scotch ale. They've got that more, darker, roasty, toasty kind of character to them, and it's got the breadiness as well. The breadiness has the grainy character that you would expect from the Scottish side of the Scotch ale, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business in that way. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty, barrel-aged side of this beer, to be honest. So let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. So when it comes to the hoppy side of these beers, quite often the Scottish ones will use a hop called Bramling's Cross, because it gives you the nice red fruity character. It's an English hop, of course. So yeah, I do wonder what hop they will have used in this one. In fact, Northern Brewer from Germany would be a good alternative to the Bramling's Cross. But yeah, the notes that you get out of this one and the green component are again pretty much what you'd expect. You can smell a wee bit of the earthiness in the back of the nose. There's a good little bit of a slightly herbal character in there. You get some kind of floral aromatic notes, but remember, English hops for me have always been a little bit more kind of herbal rather than bright and floral in the same way that the German ones are. So yeah, you do get a little bit of that kind of floral aromaticity out of it, and there's a wee bit of a light kind of grassy character to this beer as well. So yeah, the grassy notes that you get out of this one, they do have a little tiny touch of zestiness to them, I would say. But yeah, the way that the grassiness comes together in this beer on top of the floral notes, I think is pretty nice actually. So yeah, the green component of this beer is pretty much what you would expect. So yes, again, this is quite in keeping with what you would expect from the Scottish take on the Scotch ales. But yeah, fruity side of things then, to round off the aroma. So the aroma of this one is kind of interesting because you can definitely smell a little bit of that kind of cakey, Christmas puddingy sort of thing with this one. So that if you think of that cake that's kind of, that little bit of cake you've got that's kind of hard fired onto the cake that's sort of hard fired onto the side of the baking tray or whatever, that's what you get from the the fruity side of this one. You can smell that underneath, but on top of that there's definitely a little bit of a raisiny sharpness in there. You've got some nice kind of plummy and pruny notes, a bit of an oily kind of plum, a more dry kind of pruny note, and you also get a little bit of, you know, the kind of the typical figgy quality, and a wee bit, you know, a little bit of the figgy and black currant, but you also get a bit of a more kind of round blackberry note out of this one. So I've got a feeling that the hops in this beer are most likely to be either English Bramling's Cross or potentially German Northern Brewer, and the smoothness from them does make me wonder, maybe German Northern Brewer. But of course there are other alternatives in there. You could use something like Summit or Williamette from the States, or Eureka would be another one. So I'm not 100% sure about what hops exactly they would use in this particular beer, but it certainly smells very nice. And as I say, very authentic smelling beer, this one. It really smells like the Scottish. It really smells like the kind of Scottish brewed Scotch ales, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it's about time that we try this one then. We've spent a little bit longer getting ready for this, but yeah, so this one is the Wee Heavy, coming in at 8.5% ABV from Kimito Brewing in Kemiönisaari in the southwest of Finland. A big thank you to Riku once again for making this review possible, and my last finished review for a little while. Slange, skål, cheers, kipis and kitos. There we go. Ooh. Now that's quite interesting. This beer, it's the first impression you have of this is that it's very, very smooth actually. So yeah, it's interesting, you know. Yeah, first impression, a very woody and very bready Scotch ale, this one, and it's actually the smoky character that you get out of this is really quite subtle. So this is quite different. I'm going to say this is different from a lot of the other Scotch ales that I've had, and I've had Scotch ales from all over the place: Chile, Brazil, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I think I've had one from Hong Kong as well. A few various different countries in Europe, but this one does strike me as pretty unique in the way that it goes together. But yeah, quite a bready and woody Scotch ale, but nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. This, I think, is very, very nice. So thumbs up to Kimito for this beer. I think they've done a great job of this for sure. And I think they've got the balance with the barrel aging in this pretty much spot on, because like I said, you have to be careful with the Scotch whisky barrel aging, because it's very powerful compared to the American bourbon barrels actually. So yeah. So anyway, when it comes to the base of this beer then, let's kind of go through this beer as we normally do. So middle third of your palate and back third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of the beer is that nice kind of dry oaky wood in there. You do get a little bit of that kind of, I wouldn't call it spicy, but you can feel the nice kind of dry oaky woody character. That is the backbone of the beer in this one. As you move towards, let's focus on the middle third of your palate now. As you move towards the middle third of your palate, at the front of that, you do get, I think there's a wee slightly nutty, leathery sort of thing going on underneath that, just sitting in with the wood, infused into the wood there on the front half of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, of course, you've got that brown bready note there. You do get a wee bit of the kind of more grainy bread crust underneath, and then the smoother kind of wholemealy brown bready character sitting on top of that. But yeah, I think that it's quite a straight shooting beer in a sense, this one. It's one of these ones, you can tell that the base beer in this is quite straight shooting, but it's just really well crafted in a sense. So yeah, bread crusty base, thicker kind of brown bready notes sitting on top of it, as we say, and then on top of that you've got the brown sugary notes. And the brown sugary notes in this one, incidentally, as well as the bread, are quite authentic to what you would expect from the Scotch ale, if you like, from the Scottish brewed Scotch ales, I should say. So focus on the brown sugars. But what I would say, you know, there's just something about this beer. It feels, the smoothness of this one for me feels like it's been brewed with German malt, whereas the Scottish malt is just a little bit more grainy. in a sense, and then the malts that the Scottish breweries would use would probably tend to be a little bit more grainy than this, because a lot of the Scottish breweries will either use Scottish malt or English malt in their beers, and you can just tell with this one, it's got the right kind of flavour, but it's just a bit smoother, and I suspect that, you know, with it being a Finnish brewery, there's probably some Finnish malt in it maybe. I'm not sure how many malteries there are in Finland right enough, but I've got a feeling that they might be using German malt here, because you can just tell the way that the smoothness you get out of the bread in this one just seems a little bit too smooth to be Scottish or English malt actually. Because, you know, those malts are always just a little touch more grainy, but the smoothness you get out of the bread in this one is very, very nice. And as I say, the overall vibe of the bread has that slight graininess that you would expect of the Scottish brewed Scotch ale. So that's just something that's come into my head too. But on top of the bready notes, you certainly get the brown sugars. And so in the middle third of your palate, you've got that nice kind of circle there where all those brown sugary elements come out. So if you go to the dead centre of your tongue, you can feel there's a wee bit of a kind of concentrated, treacly molasses sort of thing there, but that's not too sweet if you like. As you move further out from that, you do get a little bit of a kind of sweeter caramelly note, but then as you push towards the extremities of that middle third of your palate, then you get the, then you start to get the more kind of toasty, roasty, brown sugary elements coming out of this one. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes together, and as I say, it's quite straight shooting in terms of its of the kind of malty side of things and how that goes together. But it really does give you an authentic take on the Scottish brewed Scotch ales, if you like. I think they've pulled that side of the beer off very, very well, in fact. So yeah, the middle third of your palate on this one is really nice, and I think the further you go into the aftertaste with it, you do get a little bit more of a leathery character out of it. Some of the nuttiness comes through, but yeah, the woodiness, the breadiness, and the woodiness, the breadiness, and the kind of you know, that just a little bit the toasty or brown sugary side of this beer come off really nicely. Now let's focus on the back third of your palate then, because what I would say about this beer, if you go to the border region between the middle third and the back third of your palate, you get a bit more of a bready build up in there, a bit of a bread crust, but then you also get a little bit more of a kind of peaty. You do get a little bit more of that kind of peaty, smoky character out of this one. So yeah, I like how this beer goes together in that regard, you know, how the smokiness comes out of the beer, I think, on the back third of your palate. So as I say, let's focus on that. So underneath everything on the back third of your palate, you can feel the smoother kind of woody elements in there. You get a bit of the kind of brown bready bread crust, a bit of the thicker brown bready notes in there. Then on top of that, you get the more airy kind of yeasty sort of things coming out of the beer. So yeah, within that kind of more airy yeasty kind of note and the brown bread at the back of the palate and the woodiness, of course, this is, I think, where the kind of peaty Scottish notes come out of this one. And as I say, I've got a feeling that this might be like, you know, a Talisker or you know, Lafroig barrel aged thing. There's just something in my mind wants to say Lafroig. There's just a bit of memory, you know, genetic memory, Scottish genetic memory, that what makes me want to say it's a Lafroig barrel that this could have been aged in. But yeah, of course, there's many distilleries on Islay and things as well that use the notes, but it's got a lovely, the peatiness to this one has a lovely, you know, it's just got a lovely little bit of a lighter kind of grassy note to it. It's got a little bit of that, just a little bit of a kind of lighter earthiness in there, and I think it complements the rest of the beer really well. As I say, this is a more bready Scotch ale for me, and I would say that this one, it's got the kind of booziness and strength to it of, you know, like an 80-90 shilling, absolutely, but it's a little bit more bready like some of the you know, maybe about the 50 shilling. So it's got the flavour profile maybe of a 50 shilling, but then it's got the kind of depth to it of an 80 or 90 shilling. I think that's probably a fair statement to make about this one. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things with this beer then, I do like how this goes together as well, and it is what you'd expect. Back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness in there, absolutely. As you move further forward, it is a wee bit herbal, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more sort of floral and aromatic, absolutely. But I do think English hops in this. The other thing though that we have to consider with this beer is that I've had it sitting for a little while. I can't remember when Riku sent me this one, but it has been sitting for a while. It's most likely also been in the alcohol warehouse for a little while too, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one a little bit, so it will be smoother than it would be if I was drinking this fresh. But yeah, I think it's got that smooth kind of English hoppy vibe to it, this one, especially the herbal notes in there. But round the front curve of the palate, it's certainly a little bit lighter and more grassy in a sense. So I do like how that goes together in this one. But English hop character, and again, that's another tick in the authenticity box, absolutely. But let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then. So fruity side of the beer, front third of your palate, is quite nice. Again, you get that nice, you get a sort of, on the border region between front half and middle third, front third and middle third of your palate, so you get a bit of bready build up again. You get a wee bit of a more toasty bread crust in there, and you do get a wee bit of a concentration of some of those peaty flavours as well. And the back of that front third of your palate with the fruits almost comes across as being a little bit kind of cake-like, but then the base of the front third of your palate, it's got a little bit of a smoother kind of, it does have a little bit of that smooth brown bready note in there. You can feel a little bit of the wood there too, but on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So when you first take the beer in, there is a little bit of a kind of raisiny note to it. So there is a little bit of a raisiny note in there, absolutely, sitting on top of that. But underneath it, underneath that, you get a little bit of, you've got a little bit, I would say, wee bit of raisiny note on top of that. Underneath, though, you get some of these, you do get a little bit of a kind of juicy plum, but then you've also got these drier kind of pruny notes, and then underneath, you get that kind of, underneath, as I say, you get a little bit of that kind of, like figgy note. You certainly get a little bit of that kind of figgy quality to this beer. I would always be interested to know how Cascade would fit into a Scotch ale with its red fruity notes. That would be interesting, but that's an experiment for another day. But yeah, the backbone of the fruity part of the beer for me is a light kind of figgy note, and as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue, you certainly get a little bit more of a kind of black curranty note to the beer, and on top of that, as you go further into the aftertaste, there's potentially just a little bit more of a kind of oily blackberry character to it. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So for me, the fruity side of this beer does get a thumbs up as well. So yeah. So yeah, the fruity side of this one, it's quite a light and almost dried fruity character as well, and that is in keeping with the vibe of the overall vibe of this beer. A very nice kind of smooth, kind of dry sort of thing. So I really like how the whole vibe of this beer fits together. This is very, very nice. Quite a bready Scotch ale, like I say. The woodiness is nice. The kind of peaty characters you get are nice. So yeah, this one gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, I think this goes together very, very well, in fact. So yeah, big thumbs up to Kimito Brewing for this one. Let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So overall, I would say this beer is it's full-bodied. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. The carbonation in this one is very, very smooth, but you can feel, the typical Nordic cleanliness that I always talk about, the high-quality water and so on. You can feel that in this beer. But yeah, it really, as I say, feels like a very kind of bready, smooth Scotch ale, in fact. So yeah, really like that about this one. So when it comes to the malty and barley side of things, as we say, it's very, very smooth, if you like. You could almost maybe say it's a wee bit savoury or whatever, but yeah, you get the nice kind of smooth woody notes underneath, you get the big bready notes, but you've also got a wee bit of sweetness on top. But the brown sugars in this beer are quite toasty as well. In terms of IBUs and things like that, this beer isn't going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness. I think it's probably, I think it's maybe about 25-ish IBUs, something like that. It's more, as I say, a savoury beer, this. You get the smoothness from the barrel aging, you get a wee touch of spice out of it, and then you get the kind of grainy, bready notes in there, so you've got a wee bit of all of that going on in this one. But not too much in the way of hoppy bitterness. You've certainly got a nice wee bit of fruity, juicy character to this one as well. It's certainly got some of the more kind of dry, fruity character to it that you would expect of the Scottish brewed Scotch ale. So yeah, as I say, a more bready example of the style. But yeah, the barrel aging side of this one is really nicely done. I think this is one of these beers where all the different elements just combine together, and I think it's really nice. Certainly not the most intense, as I say. And if you look at Untappd and things like that, people will always go for the ones that have the really, really intense flavours. But I think this one strikes me. It has the authenticity of the Scottish brewed Scotch ales, and that's what strikes a chord with me. But as I say, a little bit more bready, and the thing that makes it a bit different for me is the sort of smoothness of the bread. It's not got the kind of graininess you would expect of the Scottish brewed Scotch ales, but I think it's using German malt, and so it makes sense if that's what they're doing. But yeah, from the hoppy flavours as well, I do suspect Bramling's Cross or potentially Northern Brewer from Germany. I think it'll be one of these that will have been involved in here. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been a lovely beer to kind of sign off on my current round of Finnish reviews, I guess. So yeah, this one was the Wee Heavy 8.5% ABV from Kimito Brewing in Kemiönisaari in the southwest of Finland. Awesome beer this, and as I say, I hope you guys have enjoyed all these Finnish reviews that we've been doing for you. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Kimito Brewing, and we will return to these guys, I'm sure, at some point in the near future. Once again, thank you to Riku for making this review and all the other Finnish ones possible, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed these. Until the next time, Slanja, Skål, cheers. Check out Kimito Brewing, check out my social media and things as well, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slanja, Skål, cheers, Kipis and Kitos.